The Codex Astartes does not support this action, and the Omnissiah would weep to see it. But when the mission requires absolute annihilation, the Deathwatch will use every weapon at their disposal, even the enemies. Welcome to the Model Method. My name is Tansy, and today we're going to be making a Deathwatch Gladiator with a whole bunch of stolen Xenotech on it. This is the first time I'm kitbashing a tank for this channel, and to save some time, I'm going to be preparing the chassis off camera. Now, I do have some secondhand tanks that I've purchased for future conversion projects, but for this one, I'm going to be using a fresh Gladiator set of sprues. Now, tanks are such a great canvas to work with for kitbashing because there's all of this open space and just tons of room to work with. Figuring out the main guns are going to be the most important part of this kitbash project. Gladiators have a few different loadout options, so using Xenotech is really going to help with a lot of versatility on the tabletop. The first decision I'm going to have to make is if I want to go with this twin gun style or if I want to go with one giant cannon on the turret. Fortunately, I've got a ton of Tau bits that I've sourced from a bunch of people in my local community, and I'm going to start by playing around with some options for the twin cannons to see if they work best. Now, the integration point is going to be really important to get the right look for this type of conversion. And so when I'm lining up some different parts, I'm looking for some design aesthetic motifs that kind of line up, like the 3 notches that we can see between the gun and the armor plating here. Now, I also have this Tau BFG that I'm really considering. It looks really cool. I think the cuts here are gonna be a little bit simpler to work with. And as I was thinking about this for probably way too long, I decided I want to go extra. I want this to just really stand out. And if I'm not gonna go with a big giant gun, what am I really doing here? So I'm going to start by taking the cannon turret that comes the Space Marine side of it, and I'm just going to cut at the squarish portion here and get that ready to line up with what I have on the Tau side. And on the Tau part, I'm going to cut these pieces off of the back, but I'm going to keep them as I think they're going to help me with some of the decorations on the rest of the tank later. So I can go ahead now and tack this together just to get a feel for how it all looks, and I think it's starting to look pretty good. This is definitely the approach that I'm going to be going with. I can put the turret on top of the chassis now, and I can just look for the clearance, make sure that while this cannon is on there, it's able to rotate around and still get that range of motion. There's a bit of a kind of like a lip or like an edge on the bottom of the cannon. I'm just going to go ahead and shave that off so that it can clear the chassis a little better while it rotates. Now on the top of the turret, there's this round opening. I'm going to go ahead and take a Tau shield drone top and just pop that on there. It's almost a perfect fit, so I'm just going to go ahead and glue it down right now. This one I'm going to try to keep kind of centered, and I'm going to put some of the drone antenna on there too. Now I'm going to put a regular one on one side, but on the other side, I'm going to put this really interesting looking one that has all of these little dome lenses on there. I think this is going to help it look like, almost like it's helping the cannon target different objects or targets around the battlefield. I'm going to go ahead and glue the cannon together now. Now it's really important for me to make sure that this stays lined up. The cannon is obviously very heavy on the front end, so I'm going to pop the kind of like the joint where it attaches to the chassis off, and I'm going to find a way just to support it while it dries and to keep it aligned while it's doing so. Now, as I mentioned before, the way that these parts integrate are going to be really important. I don't want it to look like I just slap some Xeno parts on the tank. I want to make sure that the integration has a lot of different detail and greebling so that it looks like they've actually put some effort into attaching this and making it work with the tank. I found a whole bunch of these little different Tau gun pieces that I'm just going to cut up into smaller pieces and see if I can fit them around. You can see the area where the Tau portion of the cannon connects to the Space Marine portion. It's looking really rough and bare. There's a lot of flat surfaces. And I want to cover them up and give them a bunch of texture to make them look a lot more natural. I kept those end pieces when I was chopping off the back of the cannon here. So I'm going to try to find some spaces to put this in this integration point. I'll also take some pieces from that gun I just cut up a moment ago. And I've got some other Tau bits just from the bits box. I can go ahead and clean these up, just shave off some portions to make them flat. Any little, nubs that I've got sticking out, I'll clean those up now. So with all of these pieces, I can start to just try to fit them around like a puzzle. I'm trying to cover some of the flat surface, trying to make a couple of interesting looking overlaps, whatever makes this look good. Now I've even got some of these leftover Necron Warrior gun kind of like cabling pieces. I used some in a previous project on my channel, so I'm going to use those as well. I'm really looking for some more variety here. I'm trying to find bits that add little bits of, I don't know, like glass or domes or buttons, anything to add more of that texture and make it look more natural. So with a ton of variety in the shapes here, I can move on to just a couple of other parts on the turret that I can add some more detail to. And so from that gun I cut up earlier, there's this round piece that came off of the back. I'm just gonna find somewhere to put this around the top of the turret. And then on the front facing portion of the turret like chassis piece, I'm just gonna put a tiny little Deathwatch symbol just to indicate that this is in fact a Deathwatch tank. Now we will come back to the turret a little bit later, but let's move on to the chassis now. The sides of this chassis just need all sorts of tactical bits to fit that Deathwatch aesthetic. I think Deathwatch models look fantastic when they are busy with detail. And there would be lots of different interactive components for the Deathwatch kill team members to walk up and grab whatever they need for the task at hand. The Gladiator kit comes with these little canisters that go on kind of like the top back of the chassis. I'm just gonna add those on right now. I think these already fit with what I'm trying to achieve with this look. And as I mentioned, I like the idea that kill team members actually will walk up to the side of the tank and maybe grab things or press buttons. So I've got a bunch of these different pouches that I'm gonna be using. I'm just gonna line up a bunch of those on the side of the chassis. I found some additional like canisters, kind of like fuel canisters or oxygen or gas canisters. I'm going to attach some of those on there as well. I've got this little Auspex module that I'll attach on there, as well as a little screen, like a monitor that they're maybe gonna look at different types of information on. I'll clean up the backs of these so that they can sit nice and flush against the chassis, and then I'll glue them all down and take a moment to make sure that they're all aligned well. Now moving on to the other side, I'm going to grab one of these ammo crates that I have, and I've even got another set of canisters. These ones are more like melta bombs sort of, so I'm gonna add those on there. I've got this little, almost like a half canister or half fuel cell piece that I think will fit on there really nicely. Then I just looked for some other like technology style pieces that I think are really going to help with the distribution. So again, I'll take a moment to clean up the backs, clean up some of the overlapping edges, and then I'll make sure that these are nice and evenly aligned and distributed along the chassis. Hopping over to the front of the chassis, I'm gonna toss a couple more Deathwatch icons on there. These are some of the bigger ones from the upgrade sprue. I'm just gonna place one on either side of the front here. All right, now let's move on to the side guns, side mounted guns. These obviously need to have some Tau Tech on there as well. The way they currently work is there's kind of this like housing rim piece that these bolter ends attach into. I'm just gonna go ahead and clip down the nub that's in the middle. This is what keeps the bolters aligned so that I can try to find some Tau guns to fit in there. Now, as I was digging around, I found these ones that are a little more boxy, and so I think they're gonna fit in there nicely. But what I did find is without any cuts, they're a little bit too long. And so putting two of them together is just gonna kind of look a little bit awkward. So I had this idea to cut these into two pieces. And at first I used two different barrels. So from two different guns, I took the barrel portion of them and I lined them up. But I thought this actually just looked a little bit too plain, like the edges looked too clean, it looked too boxy, and so it looked unnatural. And what I decided to do instead is took both parts of one gun that's been cut and I put the barrel portion at the top, and then I put what would be the back of the gun at the bottom. And I think this ended up looking really cool. I like the way the circular like cylinder piece sticks out of the side. I think it adds a lot of variety and it makes it look a little bit more interesting. So I can go ahead and make sure that I have two of these, one for each side, and glue them all together. Moving on to just some of the final parts for this kit bash. I'm just gonna toss one of these kind of rocket pod pieces onto the side of the turret just to cover up some of that bare space. And on the other side, I'm gonna use the other part of the kind of like the Tau cannon that I cut at the beginning of the project. I just have one more of those. I'm gonna slap that on the other side. I think it looks really natural here. On the chassis itself, I did go with one of the just vanilla, the stock kind of like hatch openings for one of the round holes. For the other one, I'm gonna put another drone top on there. This one I'm not gonna bother with the antenna for, because if I put them on, the turret will not be able to turn in that direction. It's gonna get blocked. So for now, I'll just leave those off. I think it's gonna look great this way. That just about wraps up the kit bashing portion of this video. Let's quickly move on to the painting. I'm really just gonna focus on some of the major painting tasks here. I won't be going too much into the details because I don't want this video to go on forever. But obviously we are gonna start by priming this thing black. Once the tank is primed, I'm gonna pull out my AK black paint, and I'm going to use a big dry brush, and I'm gonna use this kind of stippling and smushing motion in order to cover all of the tank, absolutely every part of it I can. The reason I'm doing this is the tank is going to mostly be black, but I don't want the finish to be the primer. I would rather have an actual black paint over top of that. And also the primer came out, sometimes it comes out uneven, like I'll just maybe miss a little portion here or there in the recesses. And so they won't be as even or as dark as the rest. So I think it's just gonna be better for me to cover the whole dang thing in black right now as a starting point. Moving on from there, I'm gonna grab my Pro Acryl Payne's Gray. Since I grabbed this a few videos back, I honestly don't think I've had a project without it. It might be my new bold Pyro Red, we'll see. Now this is gonna be the first layer of highlighting for all of this black chassis armor. And so what I'm gonna do is again, take my dry brush. I'm gonna use this dry brush kind of like stippling, smushing method. But this time, I'm just trying to get the upwards facing portions and I'm really trying to avoid some of the recesses. This way, I do get a bit of a subtle highlight up. Now on camera, this may not seem very visible. And to be honest, in person also, it wasn't really visible. And this is something you'll be familiar with if you've painted black armor before. Some of these layers as you go up, they may not seem very impactful. It's really once you've gotten all the way to the end and all of those highlights are on there that you can really tell what's happening with some of these, you know, darker highlights that are being added. So let's jump right up to Vallejo's Dark Sea Gray. This is gonna be the brightest highlight I'll be putting all over this tank. Now again, I'm gonna be using my dry brush, but this time I'm gonna be treating it more like an actual dry brush. So I'm gonna get a lot of the paint off of here this time, and I'm just gonna be trying to catch the edges, the ridges, and I'm really trying to go for something that's more like an edge highlight all over the tank. I didn't want to mess up areas that I'm already happy with where I've got the, you know, the Payne's Gray sitting on top. So I decided to test on the back of the chassis. If I mess that up, it's not too big of a deal. And once I was happy with the amount that was coming off, I just went all over the tank and tried to get all of those edges. Now I'm gonna be honest, I actually didn't like how this turned out. Not that it looked bad, I just didn't think it looked, you know, highlighted enough. And I probably could have spent more time finding the right amount of paint to keep on my brush or the right moisture to keep in my brush to get that. But I decided I was just gonna take the more challenging approach. Maybe it was good practice as well, but I decided to actually edge highlight all of the parts of the black chassis using a regular brush. Now, in this case, I had to use a thicker paint. I had to make sure I wiped a little bit off. The paint couldn't be too diluted or else the moment I touched my brush onto the tank, it would just seep out and it would just go all over the place. That's not what I wanted. Instead, I wanted to make sure I was very mindful of the exact consistency of my paint. And then I took a whole bunch of time just outlining every single edge, every single straight line I could see on this tank. This obviously took the longest. Honestly, it probably took longer than anything I've painted on my channel so far, but it was really worth it in the end. And I wanted it to really stand out. I wanted it to pop and I wanted it to look very clean. In cases where I did make mistakes, maybe I got a little bit of this gray, a little bit too thick in some areas, I just came back with some dots of that Payne's Gray or that AK Black. And I tried to make sure that it looked very natural as I tried to just slowly tap at those areas to clean them up. Now on to the Tau technology, and I decided to go with the classic Tau Ochre. This is the way Tau used to look when I first got into the game ages ago, when I was but a wee lad. And I like the way this looks. I think it's going to contrast the black and some of the other highlighting and accent colors I'll go with later. Now the approach I took here, I'm going to be using Pro Acryl's warm gray as well as their yellow ochre. And I wanted to start with the warm gray all over these parts just as base coats. I think this is a better base to put the yellow over top of. If you've ever painted yellow over top of black, you'll know that it's really hard to get good coverage. And when you don't, you end up with this really muddy, almost like greenish color. Whereas going over the yellow, using the yellow to go over the brown, I found that this is less of an issue and that yellow really stands out a lot more. I also decided to try something that I haven't tried before, which is using a makeup sponge to get all of the yellow on there. Now this worked in a few ways, but there were some ways that I didn't actually end up liking it. So it helped a lot to get the yellow onto these Tau parts while keeping the brown recesses free and clear of paint. And this is something I was really going for. The Tau look is to have these very well-defined dark lines in all of these areas that you'll see, and having the outer plating portion something that's much more bright or vibrant. So that definitely worked here. What didn't work is that I'm not used to using this technique. So I ended up with paint that was maybe a little bit too thick. And so there were areas where, you know, it just came out a little bit too thick, a little bit chalky in some cases. And I ultimately did switch back to a brush. I took a bit more of a diluted, watered down yellow, and I just went back over to smooth some areas out and to try to fix those. Ultimately, I think it turned out pretty well. It's only when you're looking at it really, really close can you tell that almost like, you know, the paint was too thick in some of those textures. Now I'll quickly move on to the metallics. That's an important part of this. I'm using AK's Gunmetal Silver as well as Pro Acryl's Rich Gold. For the silver, I found all of the different metallic accents around things like the vents, the grav technology, any of the railings that were around, the Deathwatch icons, all of those different types of portions. I just quickly went over and hit them with that AK Silver, the Gunmetal Silver. And then for the Rich Gold, I looked for any skulls or any eagle emblems and just covered those real quick. Later on, I did come back with Pro Acryl's Black Wash and just washed over all of those metallic parts just to make sure that they had a bit more depth to them. Now onto the red. As I mentioned before, there's certain colors, there's certain things I can't get away from using in my projects. Red is one of those. You'll know if you've watched any of my other videos. I'm going to first start off with some of this Pro Acryl Burnt Red, and any of the fuel canisters or like gas cans or anything like that, I'm just gonna go ahead and paint those that color now. As for the major red accent here, now when looking online and looking up Deathwatch tanks, one thing I noticed is sometimes people will look for the inset areas of their tank, portions of the chassis that are pressed in, and they will pick those out and paint those a nice deep red. I love the way this looks. This is one of my favorite things about Deathwatch tanks. It's such a perfect two-tone look. So I'm gonna go ahead and do that now. What I'm not sure of is if this was the right time to do it. Maybe I should have done it earlier in the process. Maybe I should have done it before I did all the black highlighting. Well, I mean, it's too late now. I've got to get that paint in there. So the approach I'm going to take, I can't use a sponge. I can't use a dry brush. I'll risk making errors in some of the other areas. Too late in the game for me to do that. So I'm going to take my brush. I'm going to go really thin layers, and I'm just going to take my time, 5, 6, 7 layers to make sure that I get a beautiful even coat. Can't see the brush strokes. And once that's all ready, once all of that dark red is in there, I'm gonna come in with my favorite Pro Acryl Bold Pyrrole Red, and I'm just gonna pick out all of the red highlights in those areas as well as on those tanks and whatnot. The fuel canisters and those different types of tanks from before. There's a couple of other details, as I mentioned, I'm not gonna cover them here. I'm ready to just move on and give you a look at the finished model. As I mentioned, this is my first vehicle kit bash for the channel, and I'm such a big fan of how this turned out, from the part selection to the paint scheme. Deathwatch pose a great opportunity to work with a lot of different bits and clashing colors, but to still end up with a cohesive looking model. Now, though they may take extra time, I love doing these larger projects. So I'm gonna run and get started on the next one. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe to my channel if you haven't already, to make sure that you can catch up with me on my next project. And until then, I hope you take care. Bye.